Live on the Red Pill Diaries. And once again, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for joining us on another edition of the most powerful platform for truth, bar none, on God's green earth. This is your platform for education, elevation, and edification. This is the Red Pill Diaries. I'm your host, your brother, and your friend Rashid. And we have a very special guest coming from across the pond in the UK, retired Royal Navy Commodore Steve Jermy, as we bring him on live. Thank you for joining us today, Steve.
Yeah, pleasure to join you, Rashid. Hopefully you can hear me okay from all this way away.
I hear you very well. Steve, before we go into this Iran stuff, there's been a tectonic shift in the elections in Europe with Hungary. Orban has just lost the election. What will that mean for NATO? What will that mean for Russia? And what will that mean for the EU?
It's a really good question. I think it's many will be disappointed, and I think there is an open question about the extent to which the EU have been interfering in the election. They have a track record of this in other places, such as Georgia, for example, and elsewhere. I don't think there's going to be immediate impact, other than perhaps to harden views on Russia, but at a time when it's stupid to have hardened views on Russia, because it's clear to me and many other independent analyses that Russia is winning the war and very unlikely to lose. And furthermore, the Americans are much more interested in what's going on in the Gulf. So the chance of the war being won are slim. So what we really should be looking at, it doesn't matter whether it's Orban or anybody, we should be thinking about how Europe diplomatically engages with Russia rather than tries to double down on a defeat, which is surely bound to come. So we'll see. I hope that many Europeans start to see the impact, or when they see the impact on energy prices in Europe, and they realize that by refusing to talk to Russia diplomatically, they cut off 40% of Europe's diesel and 40% of Europe's fertilizer, that it perhaps wasn't such a good or wise move back all the way in 2022. I wrote about it at the time, but people weren't really listening, Rashid. So sorry, that's a bit of a long answer to the question, but the answer is I hope it doesn't make too much difference, because it's about time, as with the case in the Gulf War, that we started talking about diplomacy in the West as opposed to doubling down on failure.
And what's crazy about this is, why would the EU allow the United States to? They see that the United States is a backstabber. I'm just going to call it like it is. The United States promised to supply all of the needs of natural gas, and as soon as Europe sanctioned Russia's natural gas and everything else, the United States says, yes, we're going to sell it to you, but we have to sell it to you for far more a higher price than what we normally would sell it to you. I mean, at every turn, the United States has backstabbed its so-called closest allies, and yet they're still falling for the okey doke. Why would you think that these politicians are still doing that?
But the two principal reasons, Rashid. Firstly, we have a set of European leaders, including in NATO and the EU, who are not strategically competent. If they were competent, they wouldn't be acting in the way they are. The second reason, which is as important, is that they are energy blind, as indeed is most of our societies, as indeed is most of our press. I think that's less so, although still there is a lot of energy blindness in the United States as well. I happen to work now in the energy industry. I've been working in it for the last 15 years after my naval career. So I understand it extremely well, but it's very, very frustrating to see politicians do things which are acting against the national strategic interests of a country, because it's actually reducing its energy options. It shows they have no understanding of quite how critical energy is, in particular hydrocarbons are, to the functioning of a modern industrial society. I just correct you on one thing as well, if I may, Richie, which is I don't feel as a European that we're being backstabbed by the United States. I think we're being backstabbed by the United States administration, which is a very different thing. And from what I can see, there is a lot of concern in the United States about the way this administration is running its American affairs. So I feel both sorry for the American people, but also hopeful that people will realize that in the same way that we have incompetent leaders over here, the administration in the White House does not display any of the principled or evidence of competence, as we see in the Gulf War and the way it is foreseeably playing out disastrously in the way that so many of us forecast.
What is the temperature over there dealing with Trump and looking at the chaos that he's sowing across the globe, especially with his escapades in West Asia, starting to attack Iran, pretending that he is with negotiations, and at every turn he's bombing or killing or allowing the Israelis to kill the negotiators, and allowing and supplying the weapons and the political cover for Israel to slaughter tens of thousands of Palestinians.
The temperature is changing, or should I say that there has been until this war kicked off, I would say that the general view in Europe, because the European leading politicians were so determined to keep the war in Ukraine going, despite the fact that it's lost, that actually they were prepared to accede to other White House demands, if you like, and to not respond to them in the way that perhaps they should. I think as we see this energy crisis unfold, I think that will change. So I think the temperature is changing. I think one of the reasons it's changing is that Europe was not consulted about the war, and it should have been clear to anyone. It was clear to those of us working in the energy sector that the potential for catastrophe and energy catastrophe was clear. It's foreseeably clear. I'm certainly on the record on people like Daniel Davis and other fellow podcasters saying exactly that. So it seemed to me that either the White House didn't care about the Europeans, or it didn't think it through. I think what you're starting to see in Europe is, and I sense it across the political spectrum in the UK, less so on the right, more so on the left, is this bewilderment that the White House could be running down an approach which appears to be doubling down on failure. I mean, the Europeans ought to know a little bit about that because they've been trying to do the same in Ukraine with an equal lack of success. But I think that the sentiment is certainly turning against the Trump White House. And I think in the same way, Rashid, although you will know this better, that it's turning against the Trump White House in America. So, yeah, it's not good. This hasn't yet been reflected in all of European policies. So there's quite a spectrum of policies. So, for example, the Spanish, who I think are doing the right thing, have refused to allow the American use of any of their Spanish bases, whereas the British are doing what I think you have an expression in America which I quite like, was trying to ride two horses with one ass. And, we're trying on the one hand to be good allies to Russia, to the United States, while on the other side trying to not be involved in the war. And I think we would be better if we were simply to withdraw our support, make sure that the United States, not just the White House, but the United States understood that we were withdrawing our support because we believed it would be in our national interest to withdraw our support, and then start to work out how we could work independently with Europeans and other G7 countries such as Japan, Korea, and so on, to get ourselves into some sort of negotiated situation in Iran where we're actually opening the straits, at least for ourselves. Because at the moment, the idea of blockading the blockade is, I thought previous ideas were the route of showing no strategic competence, I'm afraid. It's bound to make things worse.
Could you believe, do you think that a lot of this strategic incompetence and ineptitude of the leadership of the United States and even of Europe could it be a part of the collapse of the American global order led and I think one of the reasons, and I said this on multiple shows, is that they thought that they could just take the oil from Venezuela. They could then use that to weaken Russia's strategic ally Cuba, right on America's border, and then they could move on to Iran because Senator Lindsey Graham, he let the cat out of the bag um, prior to um, this lull in the war when he said that we've taken the oil and the gas from Venezuela, and if we take the oil and the gas from Iran, we'll sit on 33% of the world's oil and gas, and that would be a big boon for the American economy and the American empire another day to breathe.
I guess it could be, but I mean, an attempt, if you like. I mean, I think that it's an attempt that not many moments of rational thinking make you realise that it's an attempt that is catastrophically flawed from the outset. I mean, what we know about Venezuela is that there are significant oil reserves there, but the infrastructure has been worn down, and so is in need of significant investment, into hundreds of billions of US dollars. And speaking as somebody who works in the energy sector, investments in the energy sector don't lead to quick results. You can be sort of 2 years to 5 years to even longer to actually produce results. So no immediate result, even if they were to actually improve things in Venezuela. But when it comes to when you shift across to think about Iran, the obstacles are already happening. So you can't just take 20% of the fuels out of the world and expect the consequences not to happen. They are happening now. The only question now is the depth with which the impacts are. The way to think about the Strait of Hormuz is you can think about it a bit like a heart attack on the world system. But another way to think about it is like a tsunami. So when a tsunami happens, there is an earthquake somewhere and sooner. But again, I may be wrong. It's very, very difficult to model this any way other than intuitively, Rashid.
Thank you so much for joining me. I know you're across the pond and there's a difference in time. I want to get you back on the show again when you have some time. I want to thank you so much for joining us on the Red Pill Diaries. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, Rashid. Keep up the good work, because it's people like you and the other people on the alternative media who really matter. Because I find so much of the press on this side of the pond are very stovepiped. And I think I see it on the other side of the pond as well. So people need these alternative sources of media so they can get their news. And my view is the news should be presented in the way I tried to do it, was without ideology, but with rational analysis that's based on strategic evidence. So keep up the good work, Rashid.
Thank you, and I'll send you the video. And be safe and be blessed.
Yeah, thank you.
Everyone, hit the like buttons and subscribe. And I like to say, as I always do before I go off the air, do right by others, not because there's some material gain to be had. Do right by others because it's the right, the humane, and the godly thing to do. Because even when no one else is watching you, remember, God Almighty is watching you. And as my late, great, and beautiful mother would always say, God sits high on the throne of power, but he looks low at the actions of man. Know that I love each and every one of you who loves truth, but know that the love that I have for you will always pale in comparison to the love that God has for you. Until we next speak again, stay strong, stay true, but above all things, remember.
See it on the other side of the pond as well. So people need
man. Know that I love each